Oh, okay, so I can start over again because I know people will want to see it. Tonight, we're going to be hearing about how we can help with Bring Chicago Home, a proposed ordinance that will increase funding for the homeless in Chicago. And this affects Chicagoans, but many homeless people actually move to Chicago because there's so many more facilities available. So it does reach lots of people. And Thursday is the town hall that many of you have registered for. And that will be focusing, it's a town hall with 6 panelists, and that will be focusing on the SOI bill, source of income bill. That is a state bill. So, and then I'll tell you about all the other upcoming things. I want to begin with 2 acknowledgements. One is an land acknowledgement about Native Americans and our land we're on. We begin today by recognizing and acknowledging that Illinois includes ancestral lands of the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Waya, Miami, Mascoutin, Odawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasaw nations. We gratefully acknowledge the Native peoples on whose ancestral homelands we gather, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. That's from the National Museum of the American Indian Land Acknowledgement. I also want to include a prayer for the Ukrainians. May we see the end of violence in Ukraine and beyond. May we hold our Jewish brethren and each and every innocent individual near our hearts and prayers. May peace shine through and compassion grow. May we never see a world that hatred and power outweigh love and kindness. And that is a prayer from Rabbi Jeremy Fine of B'nai Tikva in Deerfield, and that Bev Frank sent that to me. So thank you. Originally, we had planned to have Edrica Fulton and Maxica Williams talk about their move from homelessness to having homes, their journey, which inspired them to start Bring Chicago Home. And there was some miscommunication, and they're not available tonight. So we have Jimmy Rothschild, who's new to since September, that's not that new, to the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs, who's obviously been very involved in affordable housing, amongst other things, for years, and is talking about Bring Chicago Home and getting people involved since then, and is having town halls, and I think we're getting a preview of one of the town halls. And Jimmy is from Evanston, lived in Minnesota, and his wife is from Minnesota, the St. Paul area. He's back in Chicago. I think he lived in Madison and now back in Chicago. And take it away, Jimmy.
Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Beth. As Beth said, my name is Jimmy. I am, for the last 5 months or so, I have been the organizer for housing and economic justice at the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs, which is a new committee that we have. It sort of grew out of our work on the fair tax campaign a couple of years ago. There was a lot of energy to keep working on economic justice. There was a lot of energy to work on making sure that Chicago was a place where people can live affordably and where we can address homelessness. And so the body of the membership of the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs about this time last year started a process to choose a new campaign to work on. And that process culminated in JCUA joining the Bring Chicago Home campaign. So I work closely with Edrica and Maxica, who are supposed to be here tonight, as well as a number of other grassroots leaders and staff at the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, which houses Bring Chicago Home, as well as a coalition of other organizations, including grassroots orgs and unions, and and Chicagoans from across the city who have come together to make sure that all of our neighbors in the city are housed. So I am going to share my screen. We'll talk a little bit about sort of the facts on the ground right now, very briefly, around homelessness in Chicago. I know you've discussed this recently, so I won't go into too much detail. And then we'll go into some more detail about Bring Chicago Home itself, the campaign, what it's trying to do, and how we're going to get there. Any questions before I get started?
Only one item. Put your questions in the chat box and we'll get to them all. If we don't get to them tonight, Jimmy will answer and we'll send them to you for follow-up.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so let me share my screen and start the slideshow. Okay, so yeah, like I said, the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs is a constituent member of the Bring Chicago Home campaign, which is being run primarily by the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless. And we're working together to win equitable housing for everyone in all of our communities. So what does homelessness look like on the ground in Chicago right now? The Chicago Coalition for the Homeless believes that before the pandemic, there are about just shy of 60,000 people experiencing homelessness at a given time in the city. The city itself will quote a number much lower than that, more in the range of like 5,000 to 10,000. That is because the HUD federally defines homelessness very narrowly. Essentially, these are people living on the streets or in shelters. But Chicago Coalition for the Homeless knows and works with people who are experiencing homelessness that looks a little bit different. So a ton of people in Chicago are, for example, have lost their housing and are living on a couch or an extra room or the floor of a friend or a family member or a colleague, or oftentimes someone who's almost a stranger. That's a very precarious position to be in, people in really difficult relationships, and it's that much further from being one step out onto the streets. So Chicago Coalition for the Homeless and other service providers include in that definition of homelessness people who are doubled up. And because of our climate in Chicago, the proportion of people who are doubled up in Chicago is much higher. So before the pandemic, we think it was just shy of about 60,000 people who were experiencing some form of homelessness. We know that obviously the pandemic has made things a lot worse. We also know that the structural racism and inequality in the city affects this issue as well. So while only around half of the residents of Chicago are Black or Latinx, almost 80% of people who are experiencing homelessness in Chicago are Black or Latinx. You know, these structures and these systems that we see play out everywhere play out in homelessness, as should be a surprise to nobody on this call. Similarly, you have seen this map before. Every map of Chicago is the same pinwheel of injustice. So this is a map of homeless students within CPS. And you can see in the Black and Latin areas of Chicago, it's much more severe. We know that at any given time, 5% of CPS students are currently experiencing homelessness, and that for Black students, a quarter of Black students will experience at least temporary homelessness at some point in their CPS career. Most of those are homeless in the sense of being doubled up, you know, living with a friend's parents, living with an aunt or something, but being in that precarious position of not having their own home. But we also know that a lot of students in Chicago also cycle in and out of shelters, also cycle in and out of being on the street, and that these are not fixed boundaries, right? Often the next, people will move back and forth from the street to a couch to a shelter. Why are we trying to change this, right? What are we trying to do here? We are trying to change the fact on the ground. The fact on the ground is that there's 100,000 people who are homeless at any given time. A quarter of Black CPS students are homeless at some point in their career. And Chicago spends a tiny, tiny fraction of what some of our peer cities do on homelessness. So this is a chart of this current year's spending, not counting ARPA funds, not counting the federal emergency COVID aid. So we see that New York has allocated over almost $1.5 billion. Los Angeles about half of that, and then Chicago about 2% of that. So this is a huge problem, right? We have a dire homelessness problem, and we are just simply not doing enough to address it. We did have about $100 million plus of ARPA funds come in. We don't need to get into the details of this, but this is how these funds were allocated, largely for rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing and services to keep people housed. What we want to do is to be able to spend at this emergency level every single year, right? Our homeless neighbors deserve this kind of spending in 2022, in 2023, and in 2035. So Bring Chicago Home will help us do that. And we can talk about the details of that in just a second. Yes, we know the COVID has made things worse. Because of COVID, right? We know that the number of people who are homeless has increased, but what we have concrete data on is we know that the number of people who are on the brink of homelessness has increased significantly, right? So Bring Chicago Home will also help keep people housed who are a paycheck away from being on the streets. Okay, so what can we do to address this problem? What can we do to help Chicago spend at that emergency level on a permanent basis? We can do a couple of things, right? So we can provide direct service to people who are experiencing homelessness. We can pack lunches, we can work at soup kitchens, we can provide private resources to helping people be safe and be housed. And we also need to work upstream and change the structures of our city in order to prevent the problem of homelessness and address its root causes. There are a ton of great Jewish organizations. I'm sure that NCJW partners with all of these folks who are doing great downstream work. And then JCUA and other organizations are focused in parallel on the upstream. So that brings us back to Bring Chicago Home. What is Bring Chicago Home? It's a coalition of organizations that is fighting for a change in the current tax structure that will create a dedicated revenue stream for homelessness in Chicago. So one of the reasons that spending is so low is that there is no money year over year that's earmarked for homelessness in this city. So it's at the whim of city council every year how much money gets spent on homelessness. And we know that it's never a priority, right? That our neighbors who are experiencing housing insecurity are left fighting for scraps. So BCH proposes a dedicated revenue stream for homelessness that would be earmarked every year for permanent supportive housing and other services for the homeless. And we're going to do that by modifying the real estate transfer tax. So what is the real estate transfer tax? For those of you who might not be familiar with the intricacies of tax law, the real estate transfer tax is a one-time tax paid by the buyer on a piece of property when it is purchased. Currently, Chicago has a citywide real estate transfer tax of 0.75% on all properties, commercial or residential, in the city of Chicago. Why do we think that this is a good place to make this change, a good source of our revenue? So first of all, Chicago's real estate transfer tax is quite low compared to some peer cities. So we pay that 0.75%. New York has a sliding scale from 1 to 3%. In Philly, the municipal rate, I think, is over 3%. And we know that this is going to generate a significant amount of money compared to some other revenue options. It's a progressive tax, which means that the more wealth you have, the more your property is worth, the more you are paying. And that's what we were looking for when we were trying to decide what kind of revenue do we want to raise. It's winnable. Other cities have raised their real estate transfer tax recently. So peer cities like Los Angeles and neighbors like Evanston, who passed an increase to their real estate transfer tax just a few years ago in 2018. It also, there's a constitution, the Illinois Constitution requires that if you're going to tax people differently on the same tax, that there be a rational relationship between the source of revenue and the spending. So in this case, the source of revenue, the class of people that we're taxing are those who can afford property owners, and we are using that property-based income to spend money on housing. That housing-based income goes to housing-based spending. We know that that will keep us on a safe legal, it will essentially keep a legal challenge to this tax at bay when the right-wing, revenue hawks want to try to challenge it. If there's that rational relationship, it puts us on much, much safer legal ground. So what is our proposal specifically? Our proposal is to keep the real estate transfer tax the same on all properties valued under $1 million. So that's 96% of residential and commercial properties. We would raise the real estate transfer tax from 0.75% to 2.65% on $1 million properties, commercial and residential. How does that happen? So in order for this to happen, it's sort of a three-step process. First, we need to pass a resolution out of City Council that would allow a ballot measure to go on the ballot, hopefully in November of 2022. That's our goal. So it passes, a resolution allows the ballot measure to be on the ballot. We pass it on the ballot. That essentially allows the city, gives the city permission to increase that tax. Once it's passed, the city can then implement an ordinance that would contain all the details of the increase in the spending. Okay, that was a lot all at once. I want to stop before I continue for any questions that we have right now. And then we'll do questions again at the end. Sorry, I can't see. Betty.
Are there any potential council people you think will sponsor the bill?
Yes, we will get to that in a moment. We currently have 10 co-sponsors. We'll need 26, obviously, and we've got some plans to get there that I'll detail in a few minutes. Any other questions before I move on? Sarah.
The hike you're proposing is a pretty hefty one, from 0.75 to 2.65%.
Yes.
Are you expecting, I would expect opposition to that. The real estate transfer tax, especially on $1 million or more, because that's not the only real estate transfer tax. There's county and there's state.
Yeah, so there are, I think with the county and state, it would put it just 3%. The county and state is relatively smaller than the rest. We have actually surprisingly not had that much pushback. So like so in theory, there is support for a increase to the real estate transfer tax of about this magnitude. Okay. The exact details, there is some question on, and then the real sticking point right now with City Council is the spending. So the mayor and some of her allies really want all of this money to go directly into the general fund. We know that that will make it a much more difficult to pass on on the ballot, that voters want to see where this money is going. They don't just want a tax increase in general. We saw that in our unfortunate loss in the fair tax campaign. And the
Right.
Chicago Coalition for the Homeless has extensive polling that shows essentially the more money that you can say out of this dollar amount that goes to homelessness, the more people support it. So our task right now is to get city council on board on that idea. People are relatively aligned, with the exception of like the right wing of city council, your Anthony's Napolitano and your Nick Spazzato. People are generally aligned that we should have a significant increase to.
It would also
to the
seem
red.
to me that designating it makes sure that that's where it goes, as opposed to being in the general fund.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
So we'll get into all of that in a minute, but that's a very good question. So I'm going to keep chugging, and then we can do some more questions as they arise. Oops, that wasn't supposed to be there. So as Sarah pointed out, this is not an insignificant increase to the current real estate transfer tax. So I just sort of laid it out right here, just as at a glance. So a $750,000 townhome would stay the same, and then you can see sort of the progressive increase in a $2.5 million house in Gold Coast and a $10 million office building downtown would generate a ton more revenue. And then those huge real estate sales, like when the Apple store on Michigan Avenue sold a number of years ago for tens, if not nine figures, I can't remember, would really bring in a ton of revenue. And so here, right, it's those big commercial properties that are going to bring in the bulk of the dollars here, because those are the properties that property over property are much more expensive, are much more in that 10, 50, $100 million range of the sales. And so these are what the projected revenues would be had BCH been in place in the following, in the listed years. So what's the impact of this proposal, and how would the money actually get spent? So overall, so the money would go to, as we've said, permanent supportive housing, which is housing that is available to people with extremely low or no income and provides additional services in the unit or in the building. So that's like mental health services, job training, all of those things that go to addressing the root causes of homelessness alongside putting a roof over somebody's head. This is a proven method. It keeps people housed permanently, much, much more than like rapid rehousing that just gets someone in the home without any guarantee of permanency and without any services. We estimate that with the 165, so it was supposed to be on an earlier slide, I think I left it off. On average, we think that $165 million a year would be generated by this proposal. In years where more property is sold at higher values, it would be more. In a downturn in the real estate market, it would be less. But we think that on average, 165 million would allow us to get 12,000 families off the streets or out of doubled up situations over the next 10 years. So that would account for the majority of homeless people in the city. We also know that getting people housed, providing that type of permanent supportive housing, will also go a long way towards addressing a lot of the other issues that our city is facing. So that this money will, and the spending on housing will allow us to increase health outcomes in the city, to make our city safer, to reduce poverty, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, so as I said, the majority of this funding will go to permanent supportive housing. That's those services that are provided in the building or in the unit, and is long-term and is available to anyone regardless of income. It also will, and that can be achieved and supplemented by tenant-based subsidies, which are subsidies for housing and services that follow a tenant from location to location, as well as project-based subsidies, which is to say a series of a building where the developer can apply for subsidies that would allow them to provide affordable housing units permanently for, or at least for a 30-year period. It also will allow for the construction, acquisition, and preservation of new or in existing affordable housing units. So that can be building new buildings outright. It can be repurposing currently existing municipal buildings like closed schools. It can be purchasing buildings and repurposing them. And also crucially, it involves funds that would allow us to preserve currently existing affordable units like single room occupancy housing, which is a very, very effective way and a very, very cost-effective way to get and keep people housed. So like I said, permanent supportive housing allows services to be provided in these buildings. So it would provide funds directly to service providers who are providing those services in these units, as well as standalone services. In addition, is the proposal that people, regardless of whether they live in a PSH building, could go and receive that kind of job training, mental health care, et cetera, to keep people housed. And finally, the plans are that, or the proposals are that a portion of this money also go towards homelessness prevention, which would mostly take the form of rent subsidies for people who are emergently or on the brink of losing their housing. So how would that funding be implemented? So technically the specifics of all of this funding would get decided in that last stage. So after it passes through the ballot measure, City Council would be free within the parameters of the language of the ballot measure to determine how that money gets spent. But currently there is a task force that is working on proposed language and proposed spending structure for that money. And that includes sort of people who have all sorts of different experience with homelessness, including people who've experienced themselves, direct service providers, department commissioners, et cetera, who are currently working on a proposal. And then there would be some kind of oversight board that would include these individuals as well once the ordinance is implemented. So how do we get this passed? So as we saw earlier, the first step is to get this out of City Council. It needs to pass through the Rules Committee where it's currently sitting, and then needs to pass on the floor of City Council so that we can get it onto the ballot. Our goal is to get this on the November 2022 midterm ballot. We would like, and I'm just going to close my office door real quick. Excuse me. So we believe that it will take about 6 months of a ballot campaign to win, to really do the work that needs to be done to pass that ballot measure successfully. So therefore, we are hoping to get out of City Council by the May council meeting. Similar campaigns like ECPS and others that have passed through City Council in this term have used what people call the caucus strategy, which is going through the self-selecting caucuses within City Council. So that's the Progressive Caucus, the Black Caucus, and the Latino Caucus. We are starting, so our goal is to move these caucuses to get them in full, or at the very least, the majority of each caucus on board, which would get us past 26 votes. We are currently in talks with the Progressive Caucus and are working to get on the agendas of the Black and Latino caucuses, who unfortunately right now are really focused on the ward remap, but we're hoping to still in the next month or so get on the agendas for meetings with each of those caucuses. We currently have 10 alders signed on. So if this is if you see your alder on this list, definitely reach out to them and thank them for their support. If you don't see your alder on this list, I'll have a way for you to contact your alder at the end of this presentation to tell them to get their butt in gear and get signed on to this. So it's basically, it's kind of the usual suspects for the first people to sign on to this. And then also Walter Burnett is there too, because he has a very close relationship with the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless. And Alderman Haddon is our chief sponsor. And we've also been working very, very closely with Alderman Martin, who happens to be my alder. One of the things that we're doing to try to get there is holding a series of regional town halls at the end of March to target key alders within this caucus strategy. So that's people in the way that it worked out, alders who have influence on the Black caucus and the Progressive caucus. We're holding them in community spaces, and our chances for people to hopefully address their alders directly. We've invited the alders to these town halls, and at the very least to hear testimony from people who've experienced homelessness, like Maxica and Adrika, and other leaders with Bring Chicago Home, and to hear some of the specifics of the ordinance as well. There are 4 planned. JCUA is helping organize the one on the south side, targeting Alders King and Hairston. And we sort of tangentially also invited Dowell and Mitchell in the 3rd and the 7th wards. There's a west side event for Alders Irvin and Burnett. There's a north side one for Osterman and Kappelman. And there was a small one a couple of weeks ago targeting Alderman Silverstein in the 50th ward. Like we said, this is an opportunity for us to address both alders and residents directly, to educate folks, and then to help build a base of support in these neighborhoods around this issue. And then give us sort of a platform from which we can continue to escalate if they don't sign up. So we'll be able to come to them and say, hey, we met with you. We brought 150 of your constituents to an auditorium and met with you, or invited you and you didn't show up. Now we're demanding that you sign on. It sort of gives us the opportunity to go to that next level. So all of that being said, there are some things that you can do right now. You can, if you live in Chicago, do that and do this right now. I'm going to give you like 3 minutes to pull out your phones, text this number, text BCH to 31 31 31, and it will give you a link where you can talk. You can contact your alder, and it will send an email to them that will either thank them for their support, or it will send a heartfelt request that they sign up. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that right now. And I'm going to check the chat and see what questions there were. This is Rosa. She wants you to call your alderman.
Jimmy,
Yes,
I'm
Ben.
illiterate in texting too. I created a new message.
Yes.
I put in 31 31 31.
Uh-huh.
Do I push the plus Or do I write write a text message?
You should, yeah, it should give you like the box where you actually type in the
Oh,
text.
okay.
Yeah, so all you need to do in the box where you actually type the body of the text is put BCH.
Okay.
And then it'll send you a text back and you can click the link.
Okay.
I'm gonna do this too.
Jimmy, I don't understand. I'm new with this. I have my phone. Do I hit the phone first and then go what 313131, which doesn't work? What do I do? How do I text a message without making a call?
Do you have an iPhone or an Android?
I have an Android.
So what I also have an Android. So what I did was hit the like get to this screen where it's like a phone. And then I just put in 313131. And then there's those dots up at the top. And you can hit send. If you hit the 3 dots, there should be a thing that says send message.
Okay, let me try that. Okay, 31. I have 31131. So it went, what it did was, where do I put the dots? Where are the dots? I don't understand.
I'm not sure if I can help you
When I
remotely.
did 3131, then it went into the bracket like I would have 773. Then it said 13131. So what do I do then?
Here's another way that you could do it from an Android. If you go into, you should have an app somewhere on your phone that's called Messages, and it should look like a quote box.
All right, let me see if I have something that looks like message.
Like where you go to, I don't know how much you text, but if you, it's where your texts live.
No, I don't text. I usually call people and then,
Okay.
Okay, I don't have anything like that.
All right. Well, we'll have other ways for you to get involved.
Jimmy,
Okay.
Yeah.
I was having trouble too. I have an iPhone. I think what we can do,
Here, let me actually put a link in the chat I can put a link in the chat where you can go. If you live in the suburbs, that's a great question. I will get to that in a second. That should also be a link that will work to get to the same screen where you can message your alder. Rosalie.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so you're gonna send that thing in, right?
Yeah, so I just put a link in the chat that you can go to from your browser or from your phone.
Okay.
okay.
TINYURL.com/BCHUNITED. Okay.
Okay, so that you can save that. You can go back to it. I did want to give you one other follow-up step, which is registering for these town halls and bringing your friends to them if you live in these parts of Chicago. So if you live in the 46th or 48th wards or nearby, so that's Edgewater, Uptown, mostly just those. There is a town hall on Sunday, March 27th at 2. It's largely virtual. There will be some watch party locations that will be announced to those who have registered. And you can sign up for that at this link. These are case sensitive, just so you know. If you live in Hyde Park, Kenwood, Woodlawn, South Shore, or have connections to those neighborhoods, or if you go to KAM, they are hosting on behalf of JCUA and the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, a town hall on Wednesday, March 23rd. That is 3 weeks from this coming Wednesday at 6 o'clock, and you can register here. If you live on the west side in the 26th and 27th wards, if you're Elder or Irvin or Burnett, the following Thursday, March 31st at Deborah's Place on Jackson, there is a town hall that you can register for with that link. I hope to see some of you at either the north side or the south side or the west side ones. I know that Beth said that she is a member of KAM. I don't know if anyone else is, but it would be a great thing to do to.
I am also. I'm wondering also, is it possible for us to just call our alderman and say, you know, we're really in favor of this particular idea, and why don't you support it?
Yeah, of course you can. I was just, all of this slide was intended to be was an easy way to quickly do that. If you don't find it easy or quick, and you find it easier or quicker to pick up the phone and call your alder, and you can grab that phone number or email address, then that is totally fine. Just tell them you support Bring Chicago Home in order to help house all of our neighbors, help give everyone in Chicago access to permanent supportive housing. That's a perfectly acceptable way to do this. These town halls, though, will be, I think they'll be a really powerful way to address your alder directly if they are, if you live in any of these wards.
Jimmy, has this been put onto the KM Isaiah Israel calendar?
I believe it has. I will follow up with Andy to make sure, but he's been involved in the planning.
Very good.
Yeah.
Jimmy, we have another question from Allison Hayes, but let me mention right now, I always send out a follow-up, and maybe you and I can get.
Yes, we can continue. We can have all those links in the,
Yeah, and a screenshot, because I was clueless about when I see sign that says "to," what in the world does that mean?
Great. You know what? Well, forget the texting. I'll just put a link in there that will get you to the same place.
I think.
Yeah.
I think we'll do both. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Great.
So everyone will be able to call, write, tweet. I was able to tweet. Allison Hayes has asked a question. Are you asking any of the religious organizations to get involved? Many are.
So yes, a number of religious organizations are already involved. So as you can see, KAM is hosting this. There are a number of churches on the south side that are sending folks along to that one. And then Bring Chicago Home, if you're interested in getting involved, I can send information about this as well. Bring Chicago Home has an interfaith table where every month clergy and lay leaders from religious organizations across the city get together and sort of talk about work that they're doing on BCH and how to get their congregations involved. So right now there's plans to do presentations at churches all over the city, mosques, synagogues. Rabbi Stephen Phillip from Mishkan sits at that table, as does Rabbi Scott from Temple Sholem.
Have you contacted KAM, Rothschild Tzedek?
I'm in contact with their social justice committee.
Good.
Yeah. Carol and Betty both have their hands up. I see Betty first.
I want to go back to the money from the commercial.
Yeah, hold on, let me go back to that slide. Yeah.
Was there any consideration taken into the fact, I had to write my question down, I don't want to forget it, to the fact that commercial space is not as used as much since the pandemic? A lot of offices that once the people worked at home found out it was cheaper to keep them at home rather than rent space. so that the amount of money in real estate has gone down considerably? I said, it seems to be tanking. Was any consideration given to that fact?
That is a fabulous question that I don't know the answer to. I can get with the policy experts at the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless who've done this sort of policy design and follow up with you via NCJW once I get an answer on that.
Yeah, I was just thinking that
No,
there
that's a really
wouldn't
good
be as
question.
much money raised if in fact the buildings aren't worth as much as they were previously because they're not being rented.
It's a wonderful question. Carol, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Betty asked one of my 3 questions, but well, I had 2 questions and a comment.
Great.
My second question has to do with, I do live in Edgewater,
Mhm.
and Harry Osterman is our alderman,
Yes,
and he chairs the housing committee,
yes.
and he is very proud of all of his work on affordable housing.
Mhm.
So it surprises me that he wouldn't jump at
It
the
surprises us too, Carol.
Yeah, so, but the other thing that you should know is that he already has someone declared it from the progressive community in Edgewater.
Yeah, we're working with Nick.
Okay, so
Yeah.
he has competition for his aldermanic seat from the progressive community, who I am sure is going to support this, this initiative.
Yeah.
And so when I call him to talk to him about this, and I talk to him about lots of things and not always, and we don't always agree, so.
Sure.
But this is something that I can put in this. We consider this to be part of a very progressive agenda on housing, and I want him to know that.
Yeah.
And I think that he needs that kind of push to say, you who are so progressive about, want to be seen as very progressive on this issue,
Mhm.
you have got to be seen as participating full force on this
totally.
issue.
Totally.
Okay, so that's my second thing. The third thing is just to say to you, National Council of Jewish Women has always been on the front lines of advocacy on almost every issue,
Mhm.
as well as on the front lines of service.
Yeah.
So we are a 2-pronged organization in both. So don't ever think that we won't be there on the front lines on these issues.
Good. I apologize if I came across as underestimating you.
Okay, because that's our history for over 125
Yeah, I certainly
years.
didn't intend to. I know you all
Okay.
do the work.
I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
you knew who you were dealing with.
We have another, thanks, Carol. We have another question from Tracy Madansky and Bev Copeland. What do people,
Yes.
how do people in the suburbs help?
Yeah, so like, to be perfectly frank, other than telling your friends in the city about it, there's not a ton on Bring Chicago Home specifically to do, but there is a lot of great progressive housing legislation at the state level that's currently being debated in this session, like the source of income bill that Beth mentioned at the top, that is really, really important for anyone living in Illinois to be really vocal on. I think really the answer on if you live in the suburbs and want to get involved in BCHs is call your friends in the city, tell your friends about it, come to these town halls if you're interested. If you live in Oak Park, maybe go to the one on the west side. If you live in the south suburbs, maybe go to the one in Hyde Park. If you live in the north suburbs, maybe come to the one in Edgewater. Folks would love to have you there. And then, just use your connections in the city. I think that's, and then all the state level stuff, source of income bill, especially if that's something that NCJW is leading on, which it sounds like it is.
Jenny, thank you. I'm going to ask you something. I've been to programs about BCH from One North Side, and they do an amazing job with using social media.
Yes.
If they have something about working with the suburbs, or if you talk with them,
Yeah, sure.
can-
I'll coordinate with them. Yeah, they're the ones who are sort of running this Edgewater town hall. So
Okay,
yeah,
okay, and they're social media folks.
Yeah.
Well, amazing stuff. So
yes, they do.
yeah, if you can get that to us, it'll be helpful as well.
Absolutely.
I don't know how to do this.
We've got a few minutes left if there are other questions.
I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, I'm looking in the chat box. I don't see any. Let me see if I think, do we still want the screen up, or does anyone else
No.
raise their hand or just call out with a question? Bev, you're muted.
Am I still muted?
No, you're fine.
Okay, I just wanted to ask one question, Jimmy. I'm just shocked. I guess I shouldn't be shocked, but the disparity between dollars available in New York and, LA is just, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes.
It's just so great. And I'm wondering, it's very important to talk to our aldermen and do whatever kind of networking we can. But are you in contact with people like Jay Pritzker? You talk about the state level. He could
Mhm.
really put some muscle in the hustle. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So there, like, not to get too into the weeds of like strategy, there was a like potential, there was a potential path to this same outcome that took us through Springfield.
Mhm.
And the governor was nominally at least supportive of it. But the road was really hard between the GOP, which was obviously fully against, and some of the downstate Democrats who never want to do anything that would help anyone in Chicago. The road was really just blocked in Springfield. I think maybe trying to get the governor to use his bully pulpit wouldn't be a terrible idea. And that's something I can take back to our coalition meeting next week. But yeah, that's for sure something that we thought about and tried. And then, yeah, and now the Senate, the Senate is saying that no new revenue whatsoever is getting through the Senate this term. So if we want this done, this year, it's got to be through the city.
Okay, I get you, but yeah.
Thank you.
I admire
I
what
saw
you're
Tracy's
doing.
hand and then
Great, what you're doing.
Debbie's.
Okay, hi, thank you so much.
Of
for-
course.
This was wonderful. And like I wrote in the chat, but I don't know.
Yeah. So
I do
Um,
pro bono work in this area. I'm involved in a number of pro bono organizations in Chicago, even though I don't live in Chicago.
mhm.
And wanted to know if you are in connection with those organizations, because I think that this would be something high on their list they would want to do.
Yeah, I believe that both CLA and the Lawyers Committee for the Better Housing are at least nominally signed on to bring Chicago home, but I can double check that.
Okay, because I mean, I'm involved with both organizations.
Yeah, great.
I live in the suburbs, so I can't do much
Right,
their
right.
way, but I can, be vocal in these organizations, if that would help.
I'm sure it would. I'm just gonna write these down so I remember to ask. Go ahead, Debbie.
Hi, everyone. My question is regarding affordable housing.
Mhm.
From my experience, it seems like there is a shortage of affordable housing, especially for families.
Yes.
So I heard you talking about the new affordable housing units. It
Yes.
sounded like they would be mostly for single people. I'm aware of a family with 4 children and 2 adults who are through my congregation, they're a refugee family, and we very much struggled finding them affordable housing.
Yeah, so that's a fabulous point. And to the extent that we can plan now for how the money will be spent, obviously that's all subject to some moving and shaking once the final ordinance is getting written. There are, in the proposal is plans for 3-bedroom and up units. Not, the majority and probably not as much as needs to be there, but that's definitely something that is being taken into consideration and that are that's really a central focus of trying to make sure that those 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms are included.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and any other questions? I will have a summary and Jimmy's going to follow up about the pro bono work. And I'm going to try to take some screen snaps so that I learned a new skill tonight and I can share it with you.
That's also, I can send you these slides so you don't have to take screenshots.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Even, I mean, try out your new skills for sure,
Yes.
but I will also send you the slides.
And so excited that people are going to be doing this and we're going to be attacking this from so many different angles. Because
Yes, wonderful. I'm so glad to have you all as partners in this.
oh, I'm just thrilled. Yeah.
Yes.
Betty Magnus has a question about public housing.
Yes.
Part of the reason that I think there's a lot of homelessness, all of the housing development buildings that they tore down,
Yeah.
where they rebuilt, the housing is no longer affordable.
Yes.
Is anybody dealing with that situation in particular?
Yeah. So in a
Because
couple
they
of
were
ways.
promised they'd be able to move back in once they rebuilt them. And
Yeah. So
they're no longer affordable.
yeah. So I don't know whether specifically in this proposal there are subsidies or other help specifically for people who are former residents of housing projects. That's a really good question. What I do know that a lot of the structural things that cause those people to lose their homes are being addressed. Like there are proposals in this to use some of this money to actually like build new public housing units, right? Which hasn't been seen in the city in a very long time. So trying to sort of right some of that injustice. And then also, per Debbie's point, you know, trying to make sure that there are units available for families who need housing.
Love the support for the dog and the cat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
right.
And that, right. We need cat available public housing.
And Carol's dog as well.
You can go on the floor.
That's a
I
real
don't
good
know how to
question.
do this here. Hi, can you, oh,
Yeah, Bev, I can hear you.
okay, I was just gonna say, like, I live in Glenview, okay, I used to live in the city. And for those of us that are curious about, you know, who are really wanting to do something in the suburbs, I used to do a little volunteer work years ago at Connections for the Homeless. Do you, in Evanston, do you
Yeah.
know if there is a population of homeless individuals in that, you know, in parts of Evanston or other places in the burbs?
Yeah.
Because
So, I mean, I know,
like I like to do some direct contact because that's what my background is. And
for
you know,
sure.
just
Yeah. I
wondering.
mean, Connections for the Homeless is still going strong. And they're still serving homeless individuals and, you know, young people and families who are experiencing homelessness in Evanston. I know it's a significant problem in Evanston. As a teacher there, so she sees that. I don't know, you know, further north, I know there's some, I don't know details of homelessness or really direct service providers there. I can try to get some resources if you want. But yeah, I mean, if you want to, like, Connection for the Homelessness is
Is a good
Connection
place.
for the Homeless is fabulous, and they're still doing good
It's
work.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Sue Lobach has spoken with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And
Oh, okay,
Yes,
right. All right.
she
Thank
has
you
a
so very
monthly-
much.
She has a
Thank
monthly meeting that'd be
Mhm.
that's very worthwhile to hear. I mean, she gets down to the housing, you know, the level
Mhm.
of the city code level practically,
Mhm.
Wow.
helping how to get.
Yeah.
So I will get information and show you how anyone can.
Yeah,
get
and
on.
I believe that when they raised their real estate tax, transfer tax in 2018, that a portion of those funds are also going to address homelessness there now too.
Oh, great to hear. Thanks.
Other a question. Yes.
Who are you calling on?
You.
Oh, Okay, I just want, in reference to that last question, I'm familiar with Kurt's Cafe in Evanston.
Yeah.
I know they do a lot of work. A lot of their clients are also homeless, and they're always looking for places for them to live.
Mhm.
So if you're familiar with Kurt's Cafe in Evanston, you know, maybe
Yes.
they could use some help or your input or something.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
I know NCJW has had meetings there. So we're
Mhm.
before
Mhm.
COVID.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Right,
they're
right.
very good. It's just my parents live right around the corner.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Oh, and I understand there's Tracy just put some
Oh,
valuable.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's great.
I didn't know. There is a Kurt's Cafe in Highland Park. That's great. Don't they train people
They
to
do.
do,
Yes.
you know, food sorts of stuff?
Mhm.
There used to be so many organizations that did that, but thank you so much. That's great to know.
Well, I want to be respectful of all of your time. So if there are other questions as you're sitting with this information, let Beth know and I can answer them via her to you all. And I will also send through Beth links to all of the things that we talked about.
And before we hang up, I want to tell you about the upcoming meetings. The first one is Thursday, the Affordable Housing Town Hall, which will be specifically about HB 2775. Sorry about the jargon. Source of income. There's to stop landlords from discriminating on whether someone gets their money from aid or not. So that's an important meeting. The town hall, March 23rd. The next spotlight is March 28th. It's about disabilities with Ginger Lane, who was a ballet star and teacher and became disabled in a ski accident. And she's gone on to keep teaching and get involved in some advocacy. So that's going to be an interesting, really good program. April 25th, sex trafficking. And Amy Rubin has set up working with two different groups. We'll have the speakers closer to April. May 23rd about immigration, June 27th, anti-Semitism, and July 25th, the ECPS and community accountability. So we've got a very full schedule, and we'll be writing letters and calling in the interim. So thank you so much, Jimmy. This is terrific. You know, late this afternoon, I called Jimmy, can you come join us? And he said, sure. So
I'm happy to be a pinch hitter.
yeah, so this is terrific.
All right. Well, it was lovely spending time with all of you, and I look forward to working with you on affordable housing and homelessness issues going forward.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you all for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you all soon.